Welcome to St. John's Episcopal Church. We are honored to have JoAnn Saccato as a guest speaker tonight. JoAnn Saccato, MA, is a mindfulness teacher, life coach, an author, inspirational speaker, educator, and consultant who lives here in Lake County. So please let us welcome JoAnn.
Tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about the anticipated reactions and responses that we can expect to disasters such as the Valley Fire that we experienced here in Lake County in 2015. I also want to talk a little bit about how mindfulness, compassion, and other tools that we can use will help us recover from this disaster more quickly and more fully. And then I'm going to lead you through a couple of guided exercises that we can do together to kind of get you started with some of the tools. But first I'd like to start, raise a hand if you were directly impacted by the Valley Fire, and whether you were living in the area of the Valley Fire region or the Rocky Fire, any of the fires. If you lost anything, go ahead and raise your hand high. Okay, look around the room. Now, how many of you know somebody who was directly affected by the Valley Fire or any of the fires this summer? Okay, so now look around the room. So everybody has their hands up. And what that speaks to is the fact that nobody is exempt from being impacted by this event in our community. And it speaks to, from a mindfulness perspective, that nobody is exempt from suffering. Right? Whether we get ill when we're children or adults, whether we lose somebody that we love, that's special to us, this is all part of being human in the body. These are inevitable difficulties that we will all experience. And it's in that universality of all of this that brings us to the idea of why we bring an attitude of compassion to what has happened to us, to what is happening to us, and to everything that happens to us as human beings. So in that, and with that, so there's this inevitable suffering that we'll experience as humans. Everybody in our community was affected by the Valley Fire. But in addition to that, we all have a natural resiliency built into us that helps us through these difficult situations. So this natural resiliency that's part of our biology will actually help carry us to a new place, a place of more strength, and in our community situation, more community connection. So there were many differing degrees of impact from this event, from people that lost everything from their home, their loved ones, their community, their jobs, to folks that were just maybe on the outskirts of it, or for somebody like me, and I'll tell a little bit more about that. But we're all responding, regardless of how we were impacted, we're all responding on a physical, emotional, spiritual, and cognitive level to that disaster. It's not only expected, we can't get away from the fact that we have been impacted on those levels and those areas of our life. So for me, I wasn't evacuated from my home. I was hiking the Lost Coast at the time that the fire broke out. Didn't even know it was happening until later on in the afternoon. Came back, was able to get into the fire region within a couple days of the outbreak of the fire, which was reserved for very few people. But I was able to get in and see that my home still stood, while many people had to wait weeks to discover if their possessions and their homes were still standing. So I had this benefit, one, of not having to experience the initial impact, two, of finding out relatively soon that my home still stands. And then when I was evacuated, I was able to stay here locally in Lakeport with my boyfriend. And shortly thereafter, I went on a meditation retreat that I had scheduled months before. So I was able to be cradled in compassion and silence and support while most people were still struggling to even know if their homes were still standing. So a lot of blessings for me as far as the event itself. I also received what I consider an extraordinary large sum of money from my insurance company for what they considered was smoke damage, and basically what I considered was just cleaning my house. So I even financially benefited. So why should I have any reactions at all to this event? I mean, I came out unscathed. I came out in many ways to benefit. But yet, I experienced some very challenging reactions to it. And in the years that I've been doing a mindfulness practice, because I spend a lot of time in the inner world and understanding what is happening in my experience, I was able to recognize that it was real. Whatever my reactions were real. And I suffered from a lot of survivor guilt. May so many people be blessed as to suffer from survivor guilt. But it was a real emotional, challenging time for me, and yet I couldn't understand it because I came out so well from all of that. But what I came to, again, as a result of the practices that I do, is that I had to accept my experience for what it was, regardless of how it compared to anybody else's experience, right? The difficulties that I was having at the time were very real and palpable, and I just know that. And so I came to this understanding on my own that it was okay, whatever it was that I was feeling and experiencing. And I began meeting that rather than fighting against it, thinking that it should be something different. I began meeting it with a sense of compassion and acceptance and kindness. And it was a struggle to get there. I also thought about what my role in community would be as a result of the fact that my home still stood and I didn't have to go through the recovery the way a lot of my neighbors and community members have to. So interestingly enough, I knew that at some point I would be doing maybe something like this. Wasn't quite sure what it was going to be, but that my work with mindfulness and compassion would have a place and a role in our community as we recovered from this. So interestingly enough, I live now in the affected region. So a lot of the people that lost their homes have been displaced out of the community. And so they aren't living in the day-to-day area of the impacted, where the fire impacted us. But I do. So within a couple weeks, I was back in this area and the cleanup began and the utility trucks were in and fixing things. And the logging began. So over these 9 months that we have been recovering from this, I'm living in the affected region, and my trauma is still happening on a daily basis because of all these things that are happening around me. So it's it's just a different experience. But again, we're all affected by it in one way or another, but the degrees are differing and the stories are differing. But we're all going to have some expected reactions to them that I'm going to go over here. Shortly after, I think it was in December, I was invited to become part of the California Hope team. How many of you have heard of California Hope? Okay, so California Hope is a federally funded program that comes into into communities that have experienced disaster, and they do crisis counseling, resource navigation and linkage for folks that are recovering, and they do resiliency training for the communities. And they're usually here for about a year after the disaster to help communities come back and regain their resilience and come into their new normal, whatever that's going to be. So from this training that I did with them, I learned about some of the expected responses. And this is on a personal level, and then I'll talk more about the community level in a second. So some of the things that we can expect, which we all probably witnessed, particularly immediately following the event, was an increase in alertness and feeling challenged and involved. So a lot of people really stepped up to the plate immediately following the fire, and they ended up with a sharpened perception, and they felt a real strong sense of community camaraderie and group identification, right? We came together as a community really strong in those days following the event. There was a lot of unselfish and helping behavior. A lot of kindness came into our community, both within those of us affected as well as the outside communities that came in to help us. But in addition to those heightened things that happen when we're in a heroic phase of response, a lot of people probably began experiencing, and I'm going to raise my hands for the ones that I felt, and you're welcome to raise the hands for the ones that you felt, for a couple reasons. One is so that we recognize that we're not alone in this. And two is that you take ownership of the fact that these are actually expected, that you're right in there with where we're supposed to be as a community. So chronic fatigue and sleep disturbances or difficulty sleeping, recurring dreams, nightmares, flashbacks, reconnection or a discovery of earlier traumas. So what happens is traumas are stored in our bodies, and sometimes they can get shaken loose by new traumas. And so some of us not only had to deal with the trauma of the experience, but we also had our earlier traumas come back up and resurface. So I got to enjoy that. Anxiety or fear, being easily startled, on hyper alert, right? So I was many weeks with that. Clumsiness or increased accidents. I'm still, I've got my sprained ankle that I'm still, that's still happening a lot. Changes in activity levels. So some people actually got more busy, and some people actually, their activity levels went down. They couldn't operate at normal functioning levels anymore, and that's where I fell into. Headaches and digestive problems. So those of you that have heard my the health benefits of mindfulness talk, you know how stress reacts in the body. And when we're under stress, our bodies will shut down, not shut down, but quiet certain systems. One of them is the digestive system. The other is our immune system, right? Because we don't need those systems if the saber-toothed tiger is going to take our lives. So our genetics, our biology will divert those resources to other things that we need more immediately if we're feeling threatened. Depression, guilt, apathy, grief, frequent crying, right? So I just drove through, and I've been, up there for 9 months. I drove through an area that I drive multiple times a week and saw some new trees cut down and just burst out into tears, just uncontrollable, just not even knowing that it's there. Irritability or anger or frequent arguments, sometimes with people that you love and that are close to you. Disorientation and confusion, poor concentration. I still am not able to operate at my level of capacity for focusing and attention in the moment. And again, recognizing, that that I pretty much came out unscathed from this event, but I'm still experiencing these. So, difficulty communicating or listening. I actually had to go to the doctor to find out. I thought I was having strokes because not only could I not form the thoughts in my mind, but once they got formed, I couldn't get them out my mouth the way that they were formed in my mind. So that has subsided mostly. Difficulty communicating or listening. So sometimes our attention span, sometimes we get into what I referred to as the valley fire fog, brain fog that happened. So I was experiencing that. Difficulty setting priorities or making decisions. I was experiencing that. And for those folks that actually lost homes or possessions, the overwhelm of the thought of having to list every item that you lost down to your Q-tips, right? And then think about rebuilding and or if you want to rebuild, if you want to stay in the community, if you want to do a stick-built home, if you want to do a modular home, if you want to do some other alternative housing, that can be just so overwhelming. And to try to figure out what you need to do from day to day can be very difficult when you're that overwhelmed. And so a lot of folks were experiencing that. I know some folks that still haven't decided whether they're going to rebuild or not, whether they're going to stay in community. So these are not uncommon. Again, and just remembering, these are not only anticipated, but we're expected to experience these in reaction to disasters of this magnitude. Avoidance of triggering places or activities. I had some friends that couldn't even, the idea of lighting a candle, they would go into anxiety around that for a while. And friends that couldn't drive into the area for many, many months. So weight change. This is where my biggie is at. I was struggling with food prior to the event and am still, on a day-to-day basis trying to work through using food as a comfort in some way, which also lends itself to increased alcohol and or drug or substance use. In the trainings that we got, they said that we can anticipate, for those of us that are in recovery, we can anticipate a struggle with that recovery for up to 2 years after the event. So that to make sure that we reinforce our supports in that. So that's some of the expected personal responses. And it's important that we looked around and noticed that as we are experiencing these, that we're not alone in that. So that in itself can be very helpful, just knowing that. From a community perspective, I put one of these on each of the tables, and this is just a little bit bigger one here. So there's an expected, just like an expected personal response, there's an expected community response that happens. And without spending too much time to not read it or anything, but just using the graphic. So these are the emotional highs here, and these are the emotional lows. And then this is time, right? So in the pre-disaster phase, which we didn't have, there's certain emotions that happened during that time, but we had no notice for this disaster, right? So we jumped into this graphic here at impact. And at impact, there's intense emotional reactions that we can expect, including shock, panic, confusion, disbelief, and then self and family preservation. There's a lot of energy that is to make sure that we're okay, that we feel safe, and that our family is safe. Quickly following the impact, so our impact lasted through, many days as the fire continued to burn out of control for that many days. But immediately following the impact is a heroic phase. And we saw so much heroism happening here in Lake County. It was just amazing. During that time, there's a lot of activity, a lot of altruism, a lot of adrenaline. Sometimes there's a lot of activity with low productivity. And you're just kind of, running around. I don't want to use the idea of with like a chicken with your head cut off, but sometimes there can just be a lot of activity that's not creating a lot of outcomes on that. But everybody wants to help. And there's a lot of infusion of people that are, the first responders are out there doing their jobs to the best of their capacity, and it's an amazing time. And that leads right into the honeymoon phase of recovery from disaster. And the honeymoon phase, it was so beautiful here in Lake County to see different factions of community come together and just be very strong in their determination to find our way through this, to find our way, very optimistic that we're going to return to normal quickly, right? So that honeymoon phase, as you can see, the honeymoon phase doesn't last very long, and then we somewhat quickly, although I felt it lasted quite a while, I still see some of the honeymoon phase in some of the community. But we usually quickly run down into the disillusionment phase. And the disillusionment happens when we recognize that there's limits to the assistance, right? In the honeymoon phase, the government is here offering resources. The non-governmental organizations are here offering resources. The community members, we had a huge influx of donations and monetary support. The utilities were here. The insurance companies were here. Middletown became a city overnight with people that were responding in this honeymoon and heroic phase. Right? But then as they start finding their way back out of community, as Red Cross goes home, as FEMA pulls their trailers out of the area and our insurance companies go away, we begin to recognize that there's limits to the assistance that we're going to get as a community. We also begin to realize what it's going to take to rebuild and the county's regulations around that. And we may start getting discouraged. And we may, for those of us that were having a heroic response and a high levels of activity, we may begin to experience the exhaustion that comes in from operating that way for so long. We also begin to feel maybe some abandonment that happens as a result of these things starting to pull out. The other communities in Lake County go back to their normal day-to-day life. The fire isn't in the news as often as it was before, and people are starting to get back to their normal lives, except for those of us that were directly impacted in one way or another by the fire, or those that know folks and they're helping folks from that. So it can be a very painful time. It looks like it lasts the longest in this phase in our recovery. And we have moments of, we're starting to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We're starting to mourn the losses. And then we'll have a trigger event that will set us back in some way. Maybe we hear from the county that your setbacks have to be different and you can't have as big of a house, or, whatever that is, that your insurance company is arguing about, whether you had 5 toothpicks or you had 2 toothpicks, and you have to price toothpicks, So it can be very challenging during this time. And that's when a lot of people will reach out or need extra assistance as far as support. Then as the anniversary comes around, the anniversary to the event 1 year after that, we begin moving into the reconstruction phase. And this is kind of where we're taking responsibility for rebuilding our lives to a new normal, and to adjust to this new normal, and to actually grieve the losses that we have to grieve in order to move in to our new lives. And we're coming into that. I'm seeing homes pop up. People are out there doing it. It's really beginning to happen. But what's interesting is that we have to pretty much go through each of these phases of recovery to make it out the other side. And I want to note that if you look about where we started pre-disaster, right, this is what normal was before we had, of course, we had no warning. So we were just going along living our lives in Lake County. And then if you look after the reconstruction, it's a little bit higher than it was the normal before. And that's because, as we all know at our age, that as we find our way through difficult situations, we become stronger and more resilient, right? We're able to take on more as a result of coming through something that's difficult. So as a community, we will come out stronger. And as individuals, most of us will most likely come out stronger and more capable from this. So most of us will be able to make it through this with our natural resiliency. And if you think about normal life challenges, right? We have this resiliency, and yes, it's difficult. We change relationships, we move, we lose jobs, we lose people that we love, and we have within us the capacity to move through that, right? In those normal life challenges. But this was not a normal event. This was beyond normal event. Right? This was a disaster that happened. And so it's almost unrealistic to think that we can make it through this with our natural resiliency without a little extra assistance. Right? So reaching out and receiving help during this time of recovery to help us get back on track is something that would actually hasten or quicken our recovery. But we live in a culture that kind of tells us that we need to be able to do all this on our own. So it can be very challenging, and we can almost feel a sense of pride being hurt if we have to reach out for help. Right? Sometimes it's difficult for us to do that. But we can get back to normal more quickly if we do. And I like to use this analogy. If we as Lake County had to find our way out of this disaster on our own without outside assistance, how successful do you think we would be, and how long do you think it would take us to be able to do that? I don't think we have the resources ourselves to pull ourselves out of this. I think as a county, we had to have the support of the state, of the federal government, of the non-governmental organizations, and of all the generosity that came in from individuals all over the world to help us as a community recover. So just as we can't expect our community to recover on its own, it's not unrealistic, but, because again, a lot of us will recover with our own resiliency, but it's not unrealistic to think that as individuals we need this extra support temporarily to help us get back on track. Is that making sense? Is this making sense? Okay. So, mindfulness, compassion, what is all this? Where is this coming from? Well, mindfulness is about being present for our direct experience in a way that is non-judgmental, right? That's kind of the easy definition, is that it's about paying purposeful attention to our present moment experience with an attitude of curiosity, lack of judgment, and with meeting what we experience with kindness and compassion and allowance, right? So for those of us that struggled with our emotional reaction to this event, right, mindfulness invites us to actually be present with it, to not fight it, to not try to push it away, but to actually create what I call a compassionate container, to meet it, to meet fully what we're experiencing. And because we know that everybody is responding in some way, that nobody is to blame. This was an event that was far beyond our control. I mean, they may find where the first spark happened, and yes, that happened, but the rest of it was out of our control. And so we don't need to take that personally, the fact that we're having these responses. And because we're all having them, we can meet them with compassion. We're not at fault here, right? This is just an expected reaction to an unexpected tragic event. Mindfulness has a way, when we practice mindfulness, it has a way of creating a little more spaciousness around what we're experiencing and what we're thinking, so that we can respond more from our chosen values rather than blindly reacting from this biological level, of wanting to push it away or agitation, right? We can see that this is happening. Understanding what is expected can help us meet our experience more compassionately and kind as a result of that. So it can also help us, the compassion can also help us as a community recover from this event more easily and more fully by recognizing that most of us are living from this place of trauma response right now. And so when we get agitated in line at the store, or the clerk, that's trying to help us is not giving us what we want or need, we can maybe take a moment of pause before we react to that and recognize that maybe this person is still responding to this event. And we can give them a little more kindness, give them a little more spaciousness around what it is that they're doing. So it can help us, if you're having to go to the county or wherever it is that you're having to have interactions, that maybe we can have a little more patience with people's actions in our community. And I think that can really help, because it's been a struggle for so many. And I think about the county, the folks that are working in the front line, I consider it still the front lines, that they're having to respond to all this, the rebuilding that's going on and everything that's taking place there. And they haven't really had a break yet, and we're 9 months after the event. So cutting them a little slack, trying to be helpful and just understanding, I think can really help us as a community as a whole. So here's a few other things that you can do to help you recover personally more fully. One is to think about what has worked for you before when you found yourself in a difficult or challenging situation. What supports have helped you recover from that? If whatever those are, make sure that you've got those in place right now. Social supports are critical. They were one of the top things that we can do to help us recover more fully and quickly. And that is to have people that we feel safe around to tell our story, right? So one of the challenges with this event is that we had this diaspora of community. So many people lost their community, lost track of them as a result of being displaced. Right? So if that's happened to you, I invite you to, use technology, whatever you need to do to get reconnected with that community of people that you feel safe and comfortable with, that can meet you non-judgmentally with what it is that you're experiencing, even 9 months after. Of course, your spiritual tradition. Some people got disconnected from their churches, and so and needed to reach out and find spiritual community where they landed, right? So making sure that you keep that connection, that was another very important resiliency tool that we can have, is whatever your spiritual practice is, make sure that you stay connected with that. Try to stay connected with your spiritual community. If you have to build a new community, do so to get that shored up. If you feel like you're not getting enough support from your social network, from your spiritual community, there's other support available. You can reach out for temporary support through the counseling. I mentioned the California Hope Program. I brought in some brochures and some information about groups that they have. And again, they're here specifically for this because we know that this is what's expected after a disaster. Right? You can also look to therapy. So if you have insurance, you can check with your insurance company and see if they'll help you with some temporary therapy. If you're in recovery, strengthen your 12-step connections, whether it's with your sponsors, other community members. take in a few extra meetings a week if that will help support you. And if you can't find the meeting of your A, right, in Lake County we're somewhat limited in the A's that we have up here, but if you can't find the meeting that's specific for your A, I invite you to find any meeting to go to, because the 12 steps are the 12 steps are the 12 steps. And that support, you'll be able to find some seeds of support from whatever meeting that you attend. Plan extra time for activities. Again, I'm still not at full functioning level, right? So I give myself a cushion of time for whatever it is that I have to complete. And if I make it early, great. If not, I've got that extra cushion of time. The other thing that can help is to create short lists of things. So for those of us that are still dealing with the confusion or the overwhelm, breaking down what we have to do next into short, just small steps from here to, maybe through today or maybe through tomorrow. And then check off when you actually complete those, so that you can recognize and embody the fact that you are making progress, so that you don't get caught in the overwhelm of the big picture that's in front of you. Spend time reflecting on your achievements. Take time to note that you are making this progress, and then also spend time reflecting on things that you're grateful for, right? Particularly if you're dealing with major losses. It's very hard. The brain, again, going back to if any of you have heard my talk on the health benefits of mindfulness, the brain has a negativity bias built into it. And again, that's a evolutionarily selected thing that we have to make sure that we stay safe, right? So we will pick out and focus on the negative regularly. So it's important that if you understand about neuroplasticity, that we can actually rewire our brains to do something different, right? It's important to focus on the things that you're grateful for and the positive things that are happening in your life. And as you do that, not only do you get the moment's experience of recognizing that good is happening, you also are rewiring the brain to have a tendency to focus more on the positive in life. So that has long-term effects. Do things you enjoy, right? So some of my friends were so completely overwhelmed by their to-do lists of what they had to get done between insurance companies and rebuilding and all of that. And the invitation is to continue to have in your schedule things that you enjoy doing, things that bring you pleasure. This list and this recovery will take a very long time. So keep your life enjoyable as much as you can as we're going along through it. I've got clients that did lose their home. And so for the very difficult tasks, I invite them to sandwich those difficult tasks with two very pleasant and fulfilling things, so that they aren't just inundated with the difficult stuff. And then finally, I want to share with you just a little breath work that you can do if you find yourself in a moment of anxiety, if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed, if you feel depression or just kind of out of sorts. This breath exercise might be something that can help you. And again, it goes back to the biology of the body and how we respond to stress. So I'm going to invite you to take a deep breath in to the count of 5. So breathing in to the count of 5, and then holding it to the count of 5. And then exhaling to the count of 7 while you think of a word that brings you pleasure or peace. So it could even be just peace or calm. Right? So let's try that a couple more times. So taking a deep breath to the count of 5. Deep into your belly, holding it for the count of 5. 3, 2, 1. Exhaling slowly to the count of 7. Just whatever that word is. Calm, peace, gratitude. Good. And do it one more time on your own. So they recommend that you can practice that 10 to 15 times when you're feeling a little out of sorts there. So that's something that can bring immediate benefit if you're beginning to have any difficulty. So these are just some of the things that we can expect to experience, some tools that you can use. If you're interested in more about this topic, I wrote a few blogs and a newspaper article on it. If you sign up on my email list, it'll get you connected with the blog. So you're welcome to do that. So how do we transcend yet include our experience with the fire? How do we move forward from this? Well, we need to make sure that we allow the experience to happen, right? If we try to push away our responses, we're going to inevitably have to deal with them at some point. So the more quickly we can be present for ourselves in a compassionate and mindful way, the more quickly we will find our way through this, out the other side, to that, again, the new normal where we're stronger and resilient. And the more that we'll be able to tune into the resiliency tools that we have innate in us, we will emerge stronger as individuals and as a community. Most of us, most of the time, will come out of this stronger. Mindfulness asks us to meet the moment fully, right? To just be present with what is, without judgment, with curiosity, with kindness. Compassion asks us to meet our difficulties with love, with patience. We're also asked to meet others, or we can set an intention to meet others in this same mindful way, with acceptance and allowance of what it is that they're experiencing, maybe with a little more kindness, maybe with some compassion of recognizing that we're all, nobody is exempt from this. We're all in the middle of this together. So I wanted to share a little loving kindness practice. This is part of a compassion practice. And this is a very simple practice that is just a matter of well-wishing for ourselves. So if you would like to participate in this, you're welcome to just find a way to be comfortable in your chair. You're welcome to bring your eyes to a soft gaze or close them, but just if you go to a soft gaze, just so that you're not distracted by what's happening around you physically. And this is a very simple practice. It's a formal practice, the loving kindness practice. And it's a matter of just repeating simple phrases to yourself, again with the intention of wishing yourself well. Somewhat like if you wished a good friend happy birthday, where you really want them to enjoy the experience and to feel the good. So you'll just repeat silently to yourself the phrases. May I be well. And if you want a deeper heart connection, you're welcome to bring your attention to your heart. And if it helps you to bring your hands to your heart to feel that connection, you're welcome to do that. May I be peaceful and at ease in my mind. May I be vibrant and healthy in my body. May I be free from inner and outer harm. May I be safe. May I meet my experience, my stress, my tension, my pains, my suffering, my losses. May I meet them with acceptance, with allowance, with patience, with kindness and compassion. May I meet others. May I meet them with acceptance and allowance. May I meet them with a kindness and a patience and a compassion. And may I be happy. May I be deeply, deeply happy. So now turning your kind attention towards someone that it's so very easy for you to want good things for, holding them in your heart mind. And just repeating these simple phrases for them. May you be well. May you too be peaceful and at ease in your mind. May you be vibrant and healthy in body. May you too be free from inner and outer harm. May you be safe. May you meet your experiences. May you meet your stress, your tension, your suffering, your pain, your sorrows and your losses. May you meet them with a patience, an acceptance, compassion and kindness. And may you too meet others. May you meet them with ease. May you meet them with acceptance and kindness. And may you meet them with compassion. And may you too be happy. May you be deeply, deeply happy. And now expanding this to include all of Lake County, all of the community, all of those that were affected by the fire in one way or another. Just extending well-wishing. Everybody wants happiness. Everybody wants well-being. May we all be well. May we all be peaceful and at ease in our minds. May we all be vibrant and healthy in our bodies. May we all be free from inner and outer harm. May we all be safe. May we meet our experiences, our difficulties, with acceptance, with allowance, with compassion and kindness. And may we all meet each other. May we meet each other with ease and love and kindness and compassion. May we meet each other with patience. And may we all be happy. May we all be deeply, deeply happy. So you're welcome to take a few moments and repeat a few of those phrases that really resonated with you, or a few of your own. Just taking advantage of this quiet space and intention of well-wishing for ourselves and for others. May we all be happy. May we all be deeply, deeply happy. So again, most of us will make it through this event stronger, and our community will make it through it stronger. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And we'll become more resilient. But it's important to recognize that it's perfectly natural what you're experiencing, and it's perfectly natural to reach out for an extra hand, an extra little support right now as we find our way back to our new normal. I want to thank you for inviting me again to make this talk. If you liked the loving kindness practice, when you sign up on my email list, it'll kick you a recorded version of that. So then so you can capture it that way. There's also again information on California Hope. Team Lake County is also another effort in the community that is helping with counseling, teamlakecounty.org. And if you need more recovery information, you can go to lakecountyrecovers.com. Okay. All right, thank you all so much. So Alethea, thank you so much for inviting me to St. John's. I know St. John's is doing a lot of work in community right now to help survivors, but you yourself actually experienced the evacuation of the fire. Tell us about your homes and what happened for you.
We had a little bit more time than a lot of people to actually pack. We lived in Loch Lomond, and but we came through Cobb right as the fire just started and people were evacuating. We got to our house in Loch Lomond and packed, and by the time we left, which was like 2 hours, smoke was totally above us. The fire had actually started its own weather. It began to rain, and we could hear the transformers and maybe the propane tanks just popping.
Oh, gosh.
So that adrenaline really got us. And then it was a week and a half before we knew that our places were still there.
Yeah.
And the property we're living in now was hit pretty seriously. The fire surrounded our house. It came within 2 feet.
Oh.
And so the house didn't burn, but we're still working on clearing fire debris.
So you're still in the middle of almost the trauma that continues to happen.
Yes, in fact, I was clearing weeds and leaves from our right near our house, and I dug up the ash again just today. So, and what you were saying about having to travel through Cobb, I work in Middletown, so I was doing that circuit twice a day, and that re-experiencing of it. And sometimes you're fine, and other times it hits you.
It just, yeah, and without notice,
Exactly.
that it just hits you, yeah. So St. John's has a fascinating history that's connected to fire as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Lake County used to be a home of an Anglo-American community that was fairly wealthy. The Collier family lived on Robin Hill, and they had a mansion there. They were cousins of the Churchills. And in the mid-1890s, there was a devastating fire of their house, and their 5-year-old son was killed in the fire. So St. John's was built as a memorial to John Pierre Collier, and I believe I can't remember the exact year, it was 1898 perhaps, 1897, where the church first opened. So we are, I believe, the oldest church in Lake County.
Oh, wow.
The Episcopal presence has been here since the 1870s.
Wow.
However,
Wow. Yeah. And then there's something about in the 60s, there was something that happened with the church. They had that- yeah.
we had Reverend Carey that this hall is named after. Was a very dynamic pastor at that time, and they reconditioned the church and had to put a new foundation. So they actually moved the church into the street for, I guess, several months.
On Forbes Street,
On
right.
Forbes
So-
Street, yeah.
So Forbes Street was closed down for that several
Exactly.
months while they were putting in the foundation
And then
for the
they
church.
moved it back.
Uh-huh.
So I have a brick here that was from the old parish house, and that was demolished in the 1960s to kind of make room for the new, not the new building, but the new hall, and I think the parish hall is right where we were sitting right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it says the old parish house was built originally to house the vicar's horse.
Oh, my goodness.
The victor would travel around before there was actually a church, and there were services held, I guess, throughout the county. There was a ferry that went across the lake that I think they utilized.
Mm-hmm.
And while they were raising funds, I do not know if this is a true story, it probably isn't, but it's a fun one. They said that the church ladies actually did the can-can to raise money. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but
It is a great story.
it is a great
though.
story.
Yeah. What are these here?
These are original shingles from our church. We had to restore them a few years ago in 2013. And so we sell these for $5 to help to raise money.
Oh, sweet. But these are from 1899. this says.
1899. So that was the year the church started, 1899.
Oh,
So,
okay. Okay, great. Well, I can't thank you enough for inviting me here and for all the work that St. John's is doing in community for helping those folks that are still in recovery.
we're very lucky that we have the Episcopal community, both statewide and national-wide. We got a grant from Episcopal Relief and Development, and Episcopal churches all over Northern California and the nation sent money for our fire fund. And so
beautiful.
we have been using that, and we have helped a lot of families.
You have. Thank you so very
You're welcome.
much. Okay, great.